our next speaker. Brother Mark Reynolds, when he came to the Memphis School of Preaching, had such a tremendously good attitude about him. You just naturally fall in love with Brother Mark. He has a cheery disposition, optimistic outlook, and that's what we need. We need to believe that with the Lord's help, we can accomplish what the Lord has told us to do. And Brother Mark exemplifies that in his life. He has a tremendous family. I know his father and his uncle, who's also a gospel preacher, been associated with them down through the years in gospel meetings and other good works. And this is just a good family, a great family, I would say, and I appreciate them. Brother Mark is married to a wonderful lady named Mindy. They were married in 1991, and together they have 3 daughters, Cassidy, Abby, and Corinne. Mark's been preaching the gospel now for about 22 years. Currently serves as the preacher and is also one of the elders of the Town Acres congregation in Muncie, Indiana. We've been up in that area before on campaigns in Yorktown and things of that, and I still have fond memories of that. He's been actively involved in mission work in Tanzania, Kenya, Russia, and Jamaica, and currently coordinates a work in Kakinada, India. He and I were working together somewhat, maybe under the Far East World Evangelism banner, if you want to say that. But the work in India is such a tremendous work. It needs somebody basically who can devote a lot more time than what I was able to devote to the work in India. And Brother Mark was already doing some work in India, and so I asked him, would you just take all of that work and let it become your work? And so that's what he did, and he's been doing a very effective job. I get his newsletter and maybe talk with him from time to time, but he's taken on some more work. Since then, he serves as the regional director for the Bear Valley Extension Schools in Asia. And so that involves some other countries and some other opportunities for him. But as I said before, you know, when we start going through open doors, it seems like more doors open. And it's just tremendous opportunities. And he's a 1999 graduate of the Memphis School of Preaching and also a 2006 graduate of Amridge University. And I look forward to him coming and speaking on the topic, Fields White unto Harvest in India. Brother Mark.
John Grubb speaks Mandarin and Chinese. Billy Bland works in China. I'm going to talk so fast it's going to sound like I'm speaking Chinese. So get ready. As John said, it is hard to narrow things down, especially when you have an opportunity like this. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be here, and hope that you'll be inspired by some of the things that you see and hear, not only through my lesson, but all the ones that we hear. You see, there's the map of India. We work down here in this state, the state of Andhra Pradesh. That is probably the state in India that is strongest as far as the Lord's church is concerned. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in just a couple moments. Narrowing in a little bit, you'll see where the arrow is pointed. There is Kakinada. It's right on the Bay of Bengal. Beautiful, beautiful city with beautiful, beautiful people. And that is the center of our work that we do in the state of Andhra Pradesh. I want to start by mentioning J.C. Bailey, whose name has already been mentioned a couple of times, and he was just one of the greatest missionaries that I've ever heard of. And let me just tell you a story, and this is where I start going long, but you need to hear this. Ira Rice had been doing some work in Pakistan, and it wasn't going as great. The reception wasn't as great as he was hoping it would be, and so he made a secondary trip down into India. And the reception that he had while he was in India, and you can read all about this in his autobiography, the reception was so great that he said, this is where I'm going to stay. This is where I'm going to move my family. And he started making plans to move his family over to India because the reception had been like nothing he had ever seen before. Much to his dismay, while he was there, he found out that Americans can only stay 3 months at a time. Then they had to go back to their country, reapply for a visa, and then come back after that. And you can just tell that that's not going to be financially doable. And so he was really distraught and down about this. And this sounds like a joke that I'm getting ready to tell, but it's not a joke. On his way back to the airport, he was sitting behind two nuns. And one nun said to the other nun, how is it that you get to stay here in India? One was an American asking this question. How is it, she said to the other nun, that you get to stay in the country? You don't have to go back. How do you get such a long visa? And she said, well, because I'm Canadian. I'm Canadian. Canadians can stay here as long as we want. So Ira Rice heard this, and his ears perked up and his heart perked up, and he came back to the United States and he called J.C. Bailey. This man who was a Canadian had done already in his life. He was 58 years old at this time, had already done so much great work in India. And so Ira Rice gets back and he calls J.C. Bailey. He says, Brother Bailey, when are you moving to India? Now, his second daughter had just left for college, so they had an empty nest, but his wife had, and he had just adopted two newborn baby girls, if my memory serves me correctly. So he wasn't really at the ideal spot, being 58 years old, two new children, to go and move all the way to India. But he told Brother Rice, he said, well, I've got no plans to move to India, but Brother Rice told him about what was going on. He said, well, let me think about it, let me pray about it. And my favorite line in the book, when J.C. Bailey tells Brother Rice, I'm 58 years old. I need to start slowing down, not doing more. And Ira Rice tells him, according to the book, he says, don't you know that life begins at 58? I'll make a longer story shorter. He did uproot, moved all the way over to India. And so much of what you're going to see is because one man at that age, with that family, with those circumstances, was willing to do what he did. And I'm going to tell you something. This is not just false humility. I mean this, and Brother Bland talked about it. The things that I do, the things that we do stand on their shoulders. I go and have air conditioning. Malaria is not a problem now where I go for the most part. We get in bottled water, on every corner you go to, cold bottled water. When these men went over there to start this work, none of those things existed. So it started with this man by the name of J.C. Bailey. You go over there, and this man's name is revered still, even to this day. One of J.C. Bailey's first converts was a young man by the name of Joshua Goodham, a little bit over 50 years ago. This is Ronnie and Harita's father, Ronnie's father, Harita's father-in-law. But one of his first converts was a man by the name of Joshua Goodham, and there's a funny story that goes with that, but I won't take the time to tell that. Was one of his first converts, and as far as we know, and I say that because I really don't know this, but as far as I know, Joshua was one of the first New Testament Christians in southeast India, a little over 50, I think about 52 years ago. I was reading a report that Ron Clayton put out, and he made the statement through the best census that he could take that now in Andhra Pradesh, there are 30,000 congregations in that one state alone. I don't know if that's accurate, but he says there's at least 30,000 congregations. So in 52 years, we've gone from one New Testament Christian to 30,000 congregations. Now you think about that. How has that taken place? Well, that brings us to our next thing, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I wanted to give you just kind of what Brother Bland was talking about. I wanted to kind of give you an idea. When Paul waited for them in Athens, and Brother Bland quoted this verse, his spirit was stirred in him. I had been to Tanzania, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Russia, those places that Brother Bland mentioned. But I had never seen anything like I saw when I got off the plane and into the streets of India. That phrase, given to idols, man, Acts 16 and 17, especially 17, just came to life. And I understand that better than I've ever understood it before, just because I saw what he saw. These are some of the gods that we saw. We went to the beach. My first trip there, you don't want to go there and go straight to bed at 3 o'clock in the night. Well, let me rephrase it. You want to, but you don't need to. You need to stay up as late as you can. And so we didn't have anything planned my first trip there. And we go to the beach. They want to show me the Bay of Bengal. And you see these idols all over the beach, just scattered all over the beach. And if you look closely, you'll see that some of them are missing arms. That's one of our deacons with his girlfriends, we said. Some of them are missing arms. Some of them are missing noses and things like that. So, well, what's the deal with these gods? Why are they just all over the beach like this? And Ricky, Ronnie's brother, was telling me, he says, well, what they do, when they get finished with an idol at the temple, they'll take it and throw it in the river. The rivers over there are like their trash bins. They're their dumps. So they throw it in the river. Well, during the monsoon season, the rivers flood and they wash them out into the Bay of Bengal. And the fishermen, when they are fishing, they'll catch them in their nets and bring up these idols. And so they'll go and bring them in and they'll put them on the beach overlooking the Bay of Bengal, the ocean, so that it'll bring them good luck. Now, it's technically illegal, and here's that, technically illegal to stand before an audience in Andhra Pradesh or any state in India and preach that Hinduism is a false religion. And so I don't come right out and say that. I try to listen to what they say. However, you can preach things like this quite openly. How would you like to worship a God that can be used for a purpose for a while and then can't protect itself, becomes in a state of disrepair, and then can be taken and thrown into a river, and then can be taken and washed out into a sea, and then can be dragged up by men's nets like just pieces of concrete that they are? These gods can't protect themselves. How in the world do you ever expect them to protect you? Now, did I come right out and say Hinduism was a false religion? We did, didn't we? But we did it in a legal way. You know, these people, and incidentally, it's over 80% Hindu in India, 14% Muslim, and the last 6% falls into Buddhism and Christianity. About 2% quote Christianity, that broad blanket denominationalism and all, about 2%. But when you say things like that, these people who are very, very, very spiritually minded, when they hear things like that, boy, you want to talk about a reception, and that's what you're going to see today. You see these things all over, about every corner. You actually see in here, this is just to get your attention. The God that you will worship is actually locked up in that little cage there. I got there early one morning. I asked the priest, why did you lock up your God? And I knew what the answer was going to be. He said, because we didn't want anybody to steal it overnight. That's just sermon material. How would you like to worship a God that can't even protect itself and can be stolen? You ever heard the phrase, holy cow? Oh, there it is. Right there. This man with the orange bandana, or whatever you call it, red, was going around from house to house charging you to worship this cow. I'm going to tell you something. Hinduism is nothing but a money-making religion. Every time you worship, every time you pray at one of these temples, you are really supporting the priesthood over there. That's all you're doing. But boy, it is a money-making business. There's a God factory. Look at the dog sleeping right there next to the gods. The gods are actually out there drying from their paint job. And I just threw this one here because, man, some of those things over there in India just boggle your mind. You see, and you know you've been there too many times when things like this really don't even get your attention anymore. Look at here. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's not even a motorcycle. That's a moped. And then, have you ever heard of a photo bomb? How about that for a photo bomb? That was the next picture I took. But these are just some of the things that you see in India. Now, how has it grown from one Christian 52 years ago now to so many thousands of congregations? One of the greatest works, and let me also say this, I don't want to give you the impression that this is the only work in India. There are so many outstanding works being done in India. Here's one that I'm involved with, and here's why I love it so much. The Bible Correspondence Course, the Ira Y. Rice Bible Correspondence Course, we offer it now actually in 3 languages, English, Telugu, which is what Ronnie speaks, and then Orissa or Oriya language, which is the state just north of Andhra Pradesh. That's actually where Ronnie's mother is from that state. And so we offer it in those 3 languages. And I love this picture. I sent it to Sister Rice. I took this, I think, my 2nd or 3rd trip over there. Ira Rice, I believe, died in the year 2001. You know, he still gets mail over there on a regular basis. because we use his course, and it has his name at the top of it. And so people assume, since it's his name, that's who you send the course back to. And so you can see that made out to Ira Rice. He's been dead about 15-something years, and yet he still gets mail. He being dead, yet speaketh. What he has done here is just a tremendous thing. And so what we've done, how do you get the gospel has been talked about to every city, to every village, to every household, to every creature. The Bible correspondence course, even within India, has gone where we don't have time to go through the mail system, to the postal system. Everybody, and this is what Brother Rice really got started, everybody who completes this 25-lesson course gets their certificate, which they take very seriously over there. People who have graduated this class like 25 years ago, when I go over there to visit, they'll steal and go get their certificate and show it to me. They'll have it framed, how excited they are that they got this certificate 25 years ago. But also they get something that otherwise they probably would never have, and that is a copy of God's holy word. You complete the course, you get a certificate, and you get a copy of the Bible. We give out between 1,000 and 1,500 Bibles on a monthly basis to people who are completing these courses. There is, I don't know how many days worth that is. The ladies are getting them ready, and what we do is we screen print on there the address for the Church of Christ, the Satyavani Church of Christ. That's where Joshua serves as the preacher. So that's there in the Telugu language as well. And I wish that every single person in this building, I wish every single New Testament Christian in the United States of America could go with me. They mail these Bibles out, and then other times they will go and take these Bibles. If there's several people who have graduated the course in a certain area, and that's often what happens, they'll take those Bibles and hand deliver them. I wish every single one of you could go with me when these people get their first copy of the Bible. This lady is not a very, very young lady. She's not an old lady, but this is the first copy of the Bible that she's ever received in her life. And I'm telling you, you go out to the most remotest parts of Andhra Pradesh, and you'll see people there with their village garb and very, what we would call backwoods. I mean, you're going out in the middle of nowhere to see these people, and they'll have a copy of the Bible. And without fail, when I ask them, where'd you get your Bible? The Bible correspondence course, the Bible correspondence course, the Bible correspondence course. Listen to this number. Over 4 million people have now completed, that's not started, but have completed this Bible correspondence course, which means since this time, we've given out over 4 million Bibles there in Andhra Pradesh. How has the church gotten so strong? It's through the Bible correspondence course. That's a daily system where that's just one day's worth of mail that they send out. The potential is limitless. I use that phrase sometimes too much. Well, it's limitless. But I'm going to tell you what, in the case of India, it is limitless. It truly, truly is. I want to just share a couple personal things with you. This man's name is Prema Kumar. And one of the things I love about going to India is, I've understood the Bible in my life. These instructors here have made sure of that. They've taught me the Bible. I understand it, but I've seen it now. I've seen the pages of the New Testament and some of the Old Testament just come alive before me. I've seen things that I read about in my Bible. I've met people who have gone through some of the things that the Apostle Paul went through. This man's name is Prema Kumar. He he was a staunch Hindu. He became familiar with the Bible correspondence course. He sent in to get it. He took the course, realized he needed to become a Christian. So he traveled by bus 4 hours to find Joshua Gudam. And he and Joshua studied some more, and Prema Kumar was baptized into Christ. And Joshua asked him afterwards as they were talking, so does the church exist in your village? He says, no, I'm the first Christian in my village. And Joshua, and if those of you who know Joshua, he's got such a dry but funny sense of humor. And he said, I told this man, he said, congratulations. And he said, what? He says, you're now a gospel preacher. And you're now a song leader. You are now a communion preparation man. And you are now a communion cleanup man. In other words, you're the church. You're going back to your village. You're taking the church with you. Well, this man converted his wife. He converted his wife's parents. He converted his own parents. He began to convert people in his neighborhood. Now, this man was such a staunch Hindu that he bought some property years ago right close to the temple so it would be convenient for him to worship at the temple early in the morning and late at night when he'd come home from work. Well, the church was meeting in his home. And they quickly outgrew his living room, and so they began to build just a bamboo pole structure with a thatch roof right outside of his home. But remember, it was close to the temple. And so the leader of the temple came to him and said, one of the leaders said, "You need to stop building this or else." Now, Joshua had been telling me this story on the way out, but then I got there and I got to talk to Prema Kumar and I had him retell me the story. Now, you want to talk about some of your dumbest questions ever asked? Here it is. I'm sitting in the building as Prema Kumar is telling me this story, sitting in the church building as he's telling me this story, and he told me about this man who came to him and said, "You need to stop building this church building or else." And I asked the dumb question, "Well, what did you do?" I'm sitting in the church building. I know what he did. He kept on building. He said, "Well, I kept on building." And as he kept on building, this same man with a group of other men, staunch Hindus, came and dragged him out of his bed in the middle of the night, took him to the front yard, and continued there to beat him with clubs, with their fists. They kicked him and beat him within an inch of his life. And he's telling me this story. And I say, "Well, what did you do then?" He said, "As soon as I was able to walk, I kept building." Now, he's telling me this story. And Joshua had already told me, and now I've heard it straight from the horse's mouth. And then it was my time to preach. Now, you want to talk about being fired up to preach. I don't know if I've ever been more fired up to preach. And man, I preached and preached and preached that day. Here we got a living Apostle Paul, so to speak, and some of the things that he had been through. And man, I preached hard for about an hour, which over there is not very long, believe it or not. Preached for about an hour. And at the end of the lesson, we only had 2 ladies come to be baptized. Now, I say only 2. We would love to have 2 at every service, but over there, 2 is kind of a letdown. And these 2 ladies who are here, and they were talking back and forth in Telugu for a long time, and Joshua was talking to them, and I was wondering what was going on, but of course I didn't understand any of it. And so finally, Joshua came and sat down. He says, "These 2 ladies want to be baptized." And this was on a Friday. "These 2 ladies want to be baptized, but they want to wait till Tuesday." And of course, my first thought is, well, I need to get back up. Today's the day of salvation, but I'm with Joshua. He knows what he's doing. But as soon as we got back in the van, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, remember that man that Prema said came and led the beating of him?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, one of the women who came to be baptized, that was her husband." Now, I've repented of this, and I'm not joking when I say that. But my first thought was, it'll never happen. We'll come back Tuesday. You won't find these women. They'll either beat it out of them or talk them out of it, whatever the case may be, but we'll never see that woman again. Well, Joshua didn't want to wait till Tuesday, so we were in the neighborhood about 2 hours away, preaching somewhere else on a Lord's Day. And so while we were in that area, we stopped by and he called and told him we were coming. And so when we got there, there wasn't just 2 people ready to be baptized. There was now 7. And here is this woman that I just told you about. Does anybody want to guess who this man is? That's her husband. That's her husband. Now, I'm no Ivor Rice. Don't amen that. He would ask the follow-up questions that you need to ask. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't say anything. Let me just show you some pictures, and we'll just run through these. The 2 things I forgot to ask. Number 1, what are your names? And number 2, and I didn't ask this until the following year when I went back and visited this couple, but what in the world did you say to your husband? I don't understand a word they're saying, but I know exactly what they're saying. This man who was willing to kill for the gods of Hinduism is now saying, "I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." And then look at that picture. The man he beat nearly to death is now tenderly holding him. And now his wife is next. Isn't that beautiful? And it's hard to believe, even though I've seen it. So the next year, I got to know their names, Jaya and Satya Babu. Jaya is a truck driver. And I got to meet them, and I asked them these questions and found out more about what had taken place. And I asked her the question, the one that I've been wanting to ask for a year. What did you say to your husband? Well, she didn't answer. She's very soft-spoken. But she said a lot of things. But the biggest thing was this: it would be good for us to go to heaven together. And he said, that's the thing that got me. You see, these are things that you only read about and you get to see them. Jaya and Satya Babu. Let me tell you something now. Every night when this man gets off of work, him and Prema Kumar go out every night and evangelize. The church has over tripled in size. And these two are the best friends that you ever want to see in your life. They are inseparable together. Isn't that amazing? I don't care if my daughter, as a matter of fact, I hope that she never meets Justin Bieber. That would be all right. But 3 years ago, my daughter, Abby, my middle daughter, went on her first mission trip ever, and it was to India with me. And that was the same trip that my 65-year-old mother made her first mission trip, to India with me. And look who they get to see, Jaya Babu. Now, you want to talk about a hero. And yeah, I know he's the one that beat Prema, so why is he the hero? But to have a heart that goes from one extreme, being hard enough to want to kill for your false beliefs, but then being tender enough to let the one you almost killed be the one to baptize you into Christ, that's a hero. And I thank God that my daughter got to meet her. Incidentally, my wife has also gone with me now, and my youngest daughter, Corinne, was actually baptized over in India in a bathtub in a hotel owned by a bunch of Hindus. Let me tell you this really quick. This has nothing to do with this. But when my daughter was over there, my Corinne, who was 15, when she was over there, it was toward the end of the trip. Some of the things that she saw like this just really touched her heart. And the place where we were on the Lord's Day, there wasn't, the Lord's church didn't meet there. We were actually doing some tourism things after the trip was done. So we had our worship service in our hotel, and I offered the invitation. And I saw Corinne wasn't singing. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she says, "I'm ready." And so there was only one bathtub, one room in this Hindu hotel that had a bathtub, and it was the honeymoon suite. So that night, it was in the evening, I went down there and told them I was trying to explain to these Hindus what I was trying to do and what I needed. I'm going to tell you something, they couldn't have been more helpful. But they said, the honeymoon couple is in that room tonight. We can't do it tonight, but tomorrow morning, we'll come and let you know when it's ready. The next morning at 7 o'clock, they came to our hotel room and said, "We kicked the couple out." They are now ready. And so we baptized her. And I've got pictures of that, but I didn't include it in this. The Great Commission, let me quickly go through this. We hand out a lot of bicycles. I say hand out. We give them. These men earned, these preachers. Let me tell you something, preachers, American preachers hate me when I come to their congregations because of this. Each preacher in India, gospel preacher, preaches for an average of 3 congregations. That's an average. Some preach for more than that. Not very many preach for less than that, but the average is 3 congregations. Each of these people preach. And so, you go to a village, and it might be in the same village, but it might be miles away. And these preachers conduct the worship services in each of these places, each Lord's Day, as well as visiting and evangelizing. You give them a bicycle, or what we call over there gospel chariots, and it makes their job so much easier. Each of these bikes costs $65. You want to make a difference in the life of a gospel preacher, give me $65 and I'll send it over there, and you will help a man be able to do more than he ever thought he could be. There's one man over there, and I had a picture, I took it out. He was 84 years old, preaches for 5 congregations. I presented him with a bicycle, and his statement was, "Now I can do so much more." So we give them bicycles. There's my mom presenting the keys to these bicycles. And man, these bicycles are better than any bicycle you've ever owned. And believe it or not, even in a third world country, man, they make good bikes. My mom is handing the keys, gifted by Church of Christ. That goes everywhere they go. Another thing Forest Hill did is a couple of years ago during their vacation Bible school, Krista Mangrum asked me, "Is there something we can do? We want to do a surface project. Is there something we can do for India?" I said, well, one of the things that Town Acres does where I preach is we save our used communion cups. Our young people wash them out, sterilize them, repackage them, and I take communion cups with me everywhere, every time I go, every trip I make. Used communion cups. And so Krista started saving the communion cups up from the worship here at Forest Hill. And during that project, during the vacation Bible school, she and her other teachers and the children washed out these communion cups, packaged them up, and mailed them to me. And so every time I go, and this is some of the ones that the youth from Forest Hill sent, let me tell you something. You want to see something that will tear your heart to shreds. Watch how excited these preachers get over little plastic throwaway cups. They are like gold over there because they're impossible to get. And so we always take communion cups, and we do bring new ones too, but we bring new and used. Pure Religion, we have a children's home over there with 73 children in it. I wish I could tell you some of the stories about these kids. That guy's name is Sai Kumar. That's his pet chicken. He lives on the 4th floor. This pet chicken, I feel so sorry for this chicken. Sai Kumar's, they don't have games like our young people have. They don't have Nintendo and things like that. So what he did with this chicken would take it from the 4th floor, drop it down on the outside off the roof, and that thing would flutter down. He would run down those 4 flights of stairs, grab that chicken, bring it back up, and do it again. That chicken wasn't over there last time I was there. He probably took his own life to get out of Sai Kumar's hands. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to tell you what the kids, and I could tell you stories, but I don't want to just appeal to your emotions. But these kids, what they've been through and how much they appreciate this home and the family that they have. Pure and undefiled religion. Here's the nicest church building I've ever seen in India. This church building housed 116 orphans. So you look at that and say, well, a building like that, it only makes sense that they would have more orphans. 116 orphans that they house in that church building. This is another church building. You see some bricks here. They're making bricks. As they get money, they'll go and make bricks as they get the money. Their goal is to put walls on this church building. That church houses 7 orphans in that place. It's not how much we have. It's what are we doing with what we do have. Let me tell you something. You want to be put to shame. Go over there and see what they do with almost nothing. And what we do with almost unlimited resources. I go over there to teach, but I'm convinced, and I think any of these men could tell you the same thing, we've all learned a lot more than we've taught about what we ought to be doing. And that's why missionaries come back so on fire, is because the places where they go light that fire in them. I want to close with this, and this will bring Ronnie in. There's a few more pictures, but I want to close with this last few thoughts. We've got about 4 minutes. Telangana is a new state in India. Andhra Pradesh 2 years ago was split in half. Telangana, which is now Telangana, is a very stronghold of Muslims. Now you think of that and you hear, well, boy, that's going to be the worst place to evangelize, and you would be wrong, completely wrong in that. When India got their independence from England so many years ago, this little place of around Hyderabad, which is now called Telangana, asked the Indian government, we would like to go with Pakistan since we're all Muslims. And it's out here in the middle of the country. And India said, well, that's not going to happen. But 2 years ago, to try to appease them, they let them kind of have their own state within the country of India. The Muslims there are very against Hinduism because of their multi-gods, but they're very receptive to denominationalism. Now, Mark, how does that help us? You go to those denominations, and they are so receptive to hear the truth of the gospel of Christ. This is 2 years ago on a September trip. I was there for about 2.5 weeks. My first appointment there was a gospel meeting in the Yapral Baptist Church. The New Testament church did not exist in this area. And so one of the men who was a New Testament Christian, this is his name, this is this man right here. He got it set up with the Baptist leadership to let me hold a gospel meeting in there. So we held a 3-day gospel meeting. And their gospel meetings are not like our gospel meetings. You start about 9 o'clock in the morning and you end about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they let me for 3 days keep that appointment and preach in that Baptist church. When we got finished, the responses were over half of that congregation was converted to Christ, and at least 2 of their elders have been converted to Christ. And the New Testament church that we planted there about 2 years ago is now bigger than the Baptist church that let us have their gospel meeting. And that's not an uncommon thing. People who have been there can tell you this is not an uncommon thing. We held a preacher's seminar. This is also in that September trip 2 years ago, a preacher seminar, invited all the denominational preachers. Instead of us going to you, why don't you come to us? And I said, okay, we'll do that. And so we had, and you can see it was so packed that people are looking in. These are all denominational preachers, most of them. Some of them are New Testament Christians, but most of them are denominational preachers. On that 2.5 week trip, we converted at least 20 denominational preachers to Christ. Now keep in mind, it's not just true about gospel preachers, it's also true about denominational preachers. They each preach for an average of 3 congregations. These men went back and converted each of the congregations where they labor. And Ronnie was just telling me, he asked if I had heard from his dad, and I said, no, I hadn't heard about this, what he told me. He said from this same area, 50 Pentecostal preachers came down for a seminar there in Kakinada. They took the train and they went all the way there. All 50 of those Pentecostal preachers were converted this week. It's amazing. But here's the problem, and I love missionary problems, don't you? Because they're real problems. It's not because Sally didn't talk to me and didn't say good morning to me last week. The preacher didn't look in my direction when he was preaching. These are real problems. So you convert all these gospel preachers, or now they're gospel preachers, in just a short amount of time. What do they need? And it's obvious. What do they need? They need more education. They know the right way to worship. They know the right plan of salvation. They know a lot of good things, but they don't know everything they're going to need to know to be able to continue on as gospel preachers. And that's why Ronnie Goodham and his wife Farida are over here, so that he can go through the Memphis School of Preaching. And our hope is for him to go back in the Telangana area and begin a preaching school to train these men. So far, in the meantime, what we do is we go over there, and Joshua is so good about this, is go over there and hold these preacher seminars on a quarterly basis. These men come and we teach them more and more and more, which is a great thing, but not as good as that preaching school is going to be that Ronnie is going to help begin. It's limitless, and I wish I was 100 other things I could tell you. They garland you over there like it's nothing. Those big yellow things that they put around you. It's a beautiful thing. But there's Ronnie and her Rita. And I know I've gone a minute over. Let me just go 30 seconds more over. You get foreign people over here, and they're kind of odd. They don't do things like we do. And it's sometimes uncomfortable. But let me tell you something. You go over there, and you'll get a sense of what they feel when they come here. Ronnie and Harita in India, they are priceless to have because they're so well loved. Of course, they understand the culture and the customs, and they are so outstanding at what they do in that place. Thank God for these people who are here from other nations that are going to go back and teach your people. That's exactly what needs to happen so that we can get as many people to heaven as we possibly can. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to me, Billy. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Brother Mark. That was very, very great. Having been there and tasted some of those things, I like what Brother Joshua says. I love to convert denominational preachers. He said, because we get their buildings. We don't have to go build one. We have a building already. And so he has a good sense of humor about him, and so very, very good. Well, we have a great lunch prepared. It's free for nothing, and so it won't cost you anything. We have Leonard's Barbecue, which is being catered to us, and they always do a tremendous job. It's over here in the building next to us. I don't know are there any other people over there, or does anybody know? Are we all over here? I was thinking about just having the prayer here rather than going over. I tell you what, we'll just have the prayer over there in a moment. Could be some of the ones kind of mingling around over there, and so we'll just have the prayer over there. But we want to be back in here at 1:10 to hear our good brother Robert Martin, who's going to speak to us on the topic of bearing fruit in the Pacific Islands. You've been very good listeners this morning. I hope that you're enthused, and we'll leave. Only have a couple of more sessions as such, and then this day will be over, and then it'll be time to go to work. And so appreciate your being in here. When we'll get everybody together over there. By the way, during our lunch hour, in addition to enjoying the barbecue, Brother B.J. Clark, the director of the Memphis School of Preaching, is going to tell us a little bit about the goals of the Memphis School of Preaching World Missions program. You'll want to hear that, and we appreciate so very much your being here. So I don't want to hinder it any longer, so let's go over to the next building then. Good job.